The Tales series is my favorite franchise in gaming. From its reliance on its cast, combat being so much better than many give it credit, memorable stories across the board, and just having so much about them that clicks with me specifically, there's never been another series I've connected with as much, and my adoration for it runs deep. Despite this, believe it or not, I've never committed enough time to fully beat the entry that kicked it all off, Tales of Phantasia. Yet another Super Famicom. Yet another 16-bit RPG known for pushing this particular system beyond its limits, released in 1995. Although with games like Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, Fire Emblem 4, and so on, maybe those supposed limits were just fragments of our imagination after all. Either way, like I said, I've never actually finished it until now, which I know is blasphemous as the self-claimed Tales King, but hey, in my defense, it's not like I didn't try. Even with this game's multitude of re-releases, we filthy Americans were only officially, graced with 2 out of 5 versions that also just so happen to be the worst ones. The first version of Phantasia I tried was the GBA port. I gave it a shot, dropped it after a few minutes, and I don't think I need to explain why. After this, however, it got another English translation for iOS. They made a whole new official localization and released it on iPhones. At least I'm only so much of a dumbass that I played it for free, but I dropped it after a few minutes, and I don't think I need to explain why. This version is delisted, and the GBA port is an actual waste of time, so for those wanting a normal playing experience, you'll want to direct your attention to the original Super Famicom version, its 1998 PlayStation remake, or the 2006 PSP remake. Lots of options, but today we'll be putting our focus on the PlayStation version as well as the Absolute Zero translation for being something that could have actually been released at the time, and offering no gameplay conveniences. The Phantasia Productions fan translation is fantastic though, and I did put some time into the Super Famicom original for my own curiosity, but I decided to save that topic as well as the PSP version, which still doesn't have a fan translation, for another day. I am not talking about these two, don't even ask. Regardless of me playing a more updated version, whether it's on the Super Famicom or the PlayStation, you are playing the first Tales game. The latter just has that old school jank in a prettier package, with some refinements and a surprise or two. That's what I wanted to do at the end of the day, properly experience the premiere entry in a manner that maintains the expected first game jank I'm curious to witness firsthand. And after doing just that, ya boy has some thoughts. How did my favorite series kick things off, and in the end, is Tales of Phantasia even worth remembering? Let's take it from the beginning. Before properly getting things started, we're treated to an absolutely iconic opening. Or at least, I think it's iconic. My perspective's a bit skewed. This is now my 3rd time watching it in a 3rd version, but it's cool nevertheless. Nameless warriors are at the end of their rope against a powerful mage named Douse, and just when it looks like he's gonna finish them off, the sorcerer casts a monstrous lightning spell, Indignation. This causes Blondie to run straight into a trap, sealing him away. We then jump to the beginning of the story proper, starring a man whose name is officially Cress. This guy's name is Clark, though I am not calling him Klaus. I'm getting ahead of myself though, because the game actually starts with Cress and Chester living a simple life in a simple town. Of course, they leave it looking like this for 5 seconds and come back to it looking like this, all because of an evil group looking for a pendant to summon and free, when you know it, Douse. And after they do just that in a surprisingly short amount of time, your characters are thrown into the past as a last-ditch effort to get the strength needed to defeat him once and for all. Being dramatic, shocking, and captivating, yeah, it's a pretty baller opening. From the instantly memorable first scene, to the town getting destroyed after allowing yourself to feel its cozy nature, to the team needing to rely on time travel to defeat an enemy who's already proven to be in a league of his own, the game wastes no time getting you invested in the journey at hand. This series is no stranger to darker story elements. It's honestly kind of funny when someone's like, whoa, this Tales game is so dark, because 99% of them are like this. But even still, it's cool to see that this was the case from the jump. Gotta stand out against your Final Fantasy somehow, right? After this, however, the game very quickly falls into more of what you'd expect from a retro JRPG, a MacGuffin quest. In Phantasia's case, find all of the summoned spirits to kill Douse, with the occasional detour or two in between. And to be honest, at first, I was pretty disappointed with this after such a subversive opening act. But not only did the time travel element add a bit of flavor to what would otherwise be a vanilla plot, Phantasia nevertheless sticks out from its brethren by incorporating a more prevalent thematic through line. The Super Famicom version always opens with the quote, clearly spelling out the game's main theme. Without giving too much away, the greed and constant pursuit of more power is what gave Dallas his motivation as a villain, making for your usual humanity should be destroyed villain with your even more usual but people are good resolution. On the surface, this along with the MacGuffin hunt makes for a somewhat standard story overall, but after thinking about it more, something that stood out to me was that this message wasn't ham-fisted in the slightest. In fact, the final confrontation doesn't even have your usual defense of humanity speech. Rather, the game shows you the good in humanity through your main party's character interactions, as well as a few moments within a select few's arcs. Cress lying to Mint about her mom in order to spare the potential heartache, the truth of this matter inevitably coming out in a very heartwarming conversation, Clarth using the most powerful summon spirit just to check on a loved one, Chester and Arche's bickering turned into something sweeter, Suzu's cold exterior melting as she laughs at funny interactions between her newfound friends. This game allows its moments to showcase the usual rebuttal to this conflict, failing to deliver a cheesy overdone theme in any cheesy overdone way. As a result, it's not only more believable but sincere and more investing to see go down while giving these characters more notability due to the roles they play not just in a narrative sense, but a thematic one. We aren't quite to the point where the story overall is more character driven than plot driven, but using the cast in this way still allows them to be the most important factors to the story. And with this series being one that hinges on its characters more than anything, that's great to see. And yes, that reliance on the cast is something that was apparent from the get-go. Things like making them all playable, the heart-to-hearts they have across the story, how integral their personal conflicts are to the plot itself, and skits, at least somewhat in the early games, are all where this mindset derives. With that in mind, nailing the characters is pretty damn important, and for a first attempt, I think they did alright. Let's start with the biggest disappointment, Daus. While he's very iconic and cool in concept, he's also a bit underdeveloped for my tastes. I like his consistent presence and threats, and I kinda like how that translates to gameplay, but at the end of the day, he was fine. His motivation is alright enough, but the game comes in with a buzzer beater, dumping his lore and backstory in such an unceremonious, vague manner. This hits a little harder if you played a particular Future Tales game, but even still, it kinda falls flat. Not to mention, it's at the end of the game. Literally, I think the credits rolled like 10 minutes afterwards. I don't care anymore. If he had more time to get fleshed out, he'd be a lot better, but as is, he's aight. Just like Cress and Mint, who are the main two party members, but easily my least favorite of the main six. On their own merit, I just find them to be too one-note for my tastes. Cress, for instance, is a cool anime swordsman. He's cool, and he swings a sword. That's what he does. I kinda thought we were gonna delve deeper into his anger towards Daos, not even wanting to understand his enemy, but we never tap into any of that, and he ends up as one of the least developed characters. Not inherently a bad thing, but because of his standard personality traits, the man bores me. Kinda like Mint, who I've warmed up to a bit due to being the heart of this roster, but she still leans way too heavily on her soul-defining trait. She's the kind-hearted healer, and that makes her pretty unengaging when somebody tries to have a normal conversation with her. I didn't think much of Clarth, he's the old man who's probably just in his 30s, but the other half of the roster was a lot more solid. The fan favorite Arche achieved that status for a reason and is clearly the best of the bunch. She's the little gremlin who's the life of the party, while having some more nuance to her when you learn about her past and how she's treated as a half-elf. She also has great interactions with everyone, so it should be no surprise that she was my favorite as well. Think of it like this, nobody's questioning why she's on the thumbnail instead of the main two. I rest my case. Her aside though, I also really like Chester and the completely optional 6th party member Suzu. I didn't think Chester would be a real character after we ditched him near the beginning, but he ends up joining the group way later, retaining whatever level you left him at. Naturally, he's gonna be super behind, but this gameplay inconvenience actually plays a hand in his characterization. I love story to gameplay connectivity like this, and watching him work hard to catch up with the group with that being reflected in this video gamey way was awesome. And as for Suzu, I mean, come on, man, I just think she's neat. She's a cool ninja kid who was taught to suppress all of her emotions, but finds joy in traveling with the group despite all of her past training. I love that stuff, and while I wish she was able to join you sooner, I'm all on board with her being completely missable. On top of being a great incentive to explore, she isn't forced to have relevance within the plot, yet contributes in a way that makes sense all the while. As a ninja, she's gathered a lot of intelligence, so she knows plenty of info that helps the group, and even forms an unlikely brother-sister dynamic with Chester. On the whole, when these characters interact with each other, it's some good good stuff, with even the weaker links getting more fun. Mint's still pretty boring, often just smiling and laughing while everyone else gets to be more interesting, but I enjoyed watching Cress and Clarth bro out every now and then, and everyone tended to bring out each other's more interesting personality traits. And when you know it, most of these memorable interactions come from the skit system, a feature brought in with this PlayStation version as a matter of fact, and in my eyes, a must within the series. Being one that so heavily relies on its cast, these are an excellent tool featuring characters talking about plot advancements or any other random topic. It's so good for character development, and more than anything, I love seeing these goobers just be able to be goobers. I especially love when these conversations have to do with something gameplay related. In this game's case, when they talk about a side quest you've done. It makes those optional plot lines feel more meaningful, and of course, the more diverse topics these guys have to talk about, the better. Bonus points for being fully voiced as well, but minus a few for never showing up on the UI. You're gonna have to remember to press the select button for these, and to keep pressing it to see the batch you've built up until it eventually loops the one telling you where to go next. A minor nuisance really, kinda like how you can only watch these on the world map. You're gonna get used to it eventually. Cool ass overworld, by the way. It's not super big and starts off very linear, but it's dense throughout with a good amount of areas you're never required to see. It was fun to explore, with that enjoyment only heightening the annoyance that was this game's random encounters. I don't hate these by default anymore. I think I've officially gone through enough exposure therapy to alleviate that, but man, was this rough to go back to after seeing how the series eventually and very famously got rid of them. It's at least a lot better than the Super Famicom's encounter rate, which was, I mean, you can see the footage for yourself, it's not great. I'm not gonna factor in future games as a point against this one, but I will give this game some flack nevertheless, because come the 5th generation, these had no reason to be here. Getting rid of them was a missed opportunity, and when you factor in those segments that do put enemies on the overworld, I can't help but feel a bit teased. Anyway, we're being yanked into combat against our will, so we might as well talk about it. Although, funnily enough, saying that I'm being yanked into combat against my will isn't exactly too far from the truth. I'm one of those weirdos who actually plays JRPGs, you know, video games for the video game part, and that was one of the major things that drew me into the series in the first place. So here it is in its earliest format. It's the original, iconic, groundbreaking linear motion battle system. Or at least it would be if we were talking about the Super Famicom original. But since we're talking about the PlayStation version, this is actually the enhanced linear motion battle system, as first seen in the series' second installment, Tales of Destiny. It's a real-time combat system where you control a character in a party of 4, assign arts to them, and lay the smack down personally, with you being able to react to what enemies dish out by way of your own skill. And at least that's how it should work in theory, but as the case is with some series' earlier installments, sometimes it takes a game or two to nail down the intended vision. With Phantasia, I don't think you need me to tell you that the Super Famicom's hardware couldn't quite handle a real-time action RPG of this caliber. The PlayStation definitely could have, and perhaps it will with the system's future installments, but as for this iteration, yeah, it's not great. In fact, I'd go so far to say that it's kinda bad. Firstly, the game starts you off in semi-auto mode, which is typically par for the course, but in this first installment, manual mode is tied to an accessory you don't get until a decent way in. This is one of those quality of life improvements Phantasia Productions included, giving you the technical ring from the get-go. But I'm playing the game as originally intended, so I get to whine about it. Semi-auto isn't always as awful as some may lead you to believe, but it sure is in this game, automatically dashing you to the enemy in order for your attacks to be in range and running right back to your battle formation if you aren't already holding a direction. You also can't just dash on your own, so it takes away most of your control for the sake of streamlining. You can't see it, but this is like my billionth time using air quotes in this video. The point is, I don't like it. I don't like that I need to equip an accessory to alleviate it, and I especially don't like that controlling other characters for multiplayer is also tied to an accessory. So theoretically, if someone playing this game with you wants to have manual control, both of their accessory slots are taken, and that's just no. On that note, while multiplayer is a great addition that I definitely want in all of my Tales games, every playable character outside of Cress isn't gonna impress you by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, the game very clearly expects you to be sticking with Cress, as he gets the most arts to play with and can chain base and Ogi arts together. Maybe this is a byproduct of the original only allowing you to play as Cress, but everyone else's kits are so lacking. Why can't the fighters combo anything? And why are their kits so small? Spellcasters get a lot to play with, so why not the characters who will actually be whipping out more art in a shorter amount of time. I guess shoutouts to the mage mains who can have some more variety in their rotations, but have fun getting nothing interesting to do besides staying back and casting spells, or I guess run up in the enemy's faces and cast spells, because my teammates sure do love doing that. I shouldn't be too surprised, but my god, the AI in this game is horrendous. Your teammates instinctively go to where you set their party formation in relation to your controlled character, but even this is tough to play around when you're getting in the enemy's face or staying behind as a ranged fighter, since party members will tend to move back and forth between their attack range and where they're supposed to be. On top of this, the game only gives you so much room to move your characters in this limited formation screen, and the strategy menu is even more limited with its options. I found myself having to give my spellcasters especially direct commands, which thankfully the game makes easy to do with its 2-button shortcut in order to maintain a sense of flow. But then the spellcasters start casting their spells, and you're introduced to this disgusting thing called spell pausing. Oh, I hated this feature. From mid-level spells and up, as well as every single summon, the battle will hit a dead stop so that a spell's animation can play, never ceasing to annoy the hell out of me. And honestly, this problem starts a lot earlier than you'd expect, only getting worse the further you go. The most efficient way to deal damage and counter bosses especially is to consistently cast spells, but then I can't play the game because my attacks are consistently getting interrupted. Yes, Arche, your tidal wave is just as cool as it was the first 50 times. Can I please play the game now? Oh, for the love of... From screen clearing waves of fire, to various summon spirits I got really tired of seeing, to just buffing or debuffing a single character, spellcasters made battling so much less fun, and it wasn't even that fun to begin with. A lot of my later footage consisted of me running from fights, as a matter of fact, because I was over it. And when I couldn't, boy, I sure wish I could've. There are 0 good bosses in Tales of Phantasia, and I am not kidding. They started off as damage sponges that go on for minutes on end, and you know, that wasn't any fun. But following your first encounter with this long-haired, mother-effing, cheating-ass bastard, they became battles where if you weren't comboing them to death, they'd combo you to death. And if you're lucky, they'll even come with annoying ads. Shoutouts to the bosses who could cast spells, by the way, with no way to dodge them for that matter if you fail to interrupt them because of spell pausing, baby! As it shouldn't be too hard to tell, the worst of this was every single fight with Daos, a man who is a strong contender for the worst boss in the series. And yes, I said every single fight, because you battle him more than once and it never gets better. Daos Laser. Daos fucking Laser. The fact that he can just decide to party wipe you is absurd. Why was this allowed? And how come bosses can just whip out these killer instinct combos? Why you gotta stun on me like that? What'd I even do? There truly wasn't a single fight I enjoyed, and low-key, I mean that beyond just the selection of bosses. Especially when I started doing those optional battles where I'd go one-on-one with an enemy, it really put into perspective how rough this early attempt at combat was. It feels closer to a turn-based system, even with it being in real time, as there are far too few options to allow for player expression or any fun approaches to combat. At a point, it's gonna become more blatantly turn by turn. You're gonna get in the habit of just hitting the guy, running when they hit you, and repeating this baseline description, making up the most depth this system can provide. And that sucks to say, because combat is so important to making Tales games as great as they are. But clearly they were still figuring it out. It also sucks that I'm gonna have to deal with it again when I start playing Tales of Destiny, but I guess we'll get there when we get there. But even though this game fails on the combat front, ironically, the game's strength still lies in the gameplay. Just in a different area than I was expecting. Exploration. The overworld, like we briefly mentioned, is awesome, and towns all vary in their size as well as their layout. But what's more is that how you go about reaching these areas is only limited by how you can traverse the world. This rings true in the first act's MacGuffin hunt, and I liked it there, but the second act's admittedly repetitive second MacGuffin hunt was immediately forgiven when I realized how much more freedom I had to go about it. You get your aerial vehicles this time around, and the way the world opens up as a direct result is awe-inspiring. There were all of these side quests I never had to do, dungeons I never had to traverse, and towns I never had to visit, still being just as rewarding and fun to discover. I went into this game blind, so I didn't see and do literally everything, but I got a lot of mileage out of exploring on my own. Heck, I was able to recruit Suzu all on my own just by being curious, so the game does a great job at rewarding those who are thorough in going about the world without making too many things super obscure to get. And how about those dungeons? Remember dungeon design? Puzzles? Okay, maybe this wasn't the best first attempt. I got really tired of the you constantly take damage on the overworld hazards, but I like how many different ideas we have here. There were some especially memorable ones spread throughout the journey, with one of my favorites being the Treyant Forest Maze. You're told to follow the wildlife, and it's easy to piece together how that means if you see animals, then you're on the right path. But if you want to clean out those chests and go off the beaten path, it's easy to get lost anyway, feeling like you're going in circles as the paths twist and turn within each other, culminating in a sigh of relief at the sight of a little critter showing you that you're finally back on track. Or how about the ice cave, where the howling wind blows out the candles you lit to open the door, so you have to block off a hole with this petrified traveler to progress? While the constant damage was annoying, stuff like this made me remember so much in my quest, which was easier to do than it would have been already due to the gracious 30-hour runtime. It's a very well-paced game that lasts as long as it needs to, and it could have gone on even longer or shorter solely by how much time I decided to put into its laundry list of optional events. The game's simplicity is a bane for stuff like combat and character depth, but a feather in its cap when you're playing otherwise, giving the player the grace to go about its events in the way you want, while also leaving a bunch of other stuff to find should you choose to go off the beaten path. As such, Phantasia ended up being a rather chill vibe, with its freedom lending itself so well to the laid-back nature of it all. The presentation played a major hand in this underlying pathos as well, first and foremost being a surprisingly great-looking game. The Super Famicom version was already gorgeous, so I'm happy to report that an increase in technology brought an increase in quality along with it. Every character's sprite is so expressive in and out of battle, heightening moments on every end of the emotional spectrum. I'm not crazy about their chibi-like appearance, particularly in combat, but that can be attributed to me loving all of their designs oh so much. They're so instantly memorable, having this simple and clean look to them that I can't get enough of. The game's art direction on the whole is a sight for the eyes, with the world of Acelia's environments being so creative and fantastical. It's very easy to remember the piers of Ymir Forest, or how lava has made its home in the desert's tower, or even Dao's castle, with them all looking great in-game, as well as switching a battle's background scenery depending on where the game picks a fight. And with how much the game made absolutely sure I was looking at them, I'm glad that spell animations were a sight to behold. These, along with the overworld's irresistible 5th gen 3D graphics paired with crisp 2D sprites, never ceased to make me smile, just like this soundtrack. Again, it was already fantastic on the Super Famicom, and this game reaches that status too. I love the SNES sound chip, but I also love these arrangements and their higher quality versions, which can be chalked up to their competent compositions, as every song is melodic and memorable. Mediocre normal battle theme aside, I loved everything else, including the play over various bosses, cutscenes, dungeons, and the overworld in each of the game's time periods. We've even got an anime opening theme. Yume wa Owaranai, or The Dream Will Not Die, is a certified banger. I love how dreamy it sounds, pun not intended, with this mesmerizing piano whisking you into this fantasy world to match a beautiful singing voice. At least that's how it sounds in this PlayStation version, with the Super Famicom original having its own vibe and sounding just as incredible there. I do have a preference, but I adore this song in either case. It's a hell of a way to kick off an entire series full of opening themes, and I rarely skipped it when starting a play session. And with this banger song, we have banger visuals. This game's animated cutscenes are a sight to behold, being very fluid and detailed. They're so incredibly rare, which was a real shame, but the ones we did get look great. Coupled with some great voice acting, the solid presentation heightened an already abundant level of charm, meshing incredibly well with the title's immaculate vibes. And really, that's what stuck with me more than anything. When I had finally reached the credits and finished my long overdue Phantasia playthrough, the positives were what remained in my head more than any of the disappointments. Iconic moments like soaring through the sky as Crescent Arche, unforgettable dungeons like that spirit mine which felt like it was going to the center of the planet, traveling through each time period in hot pursuit of a consistent threat, and exploring to my heart's content was something new around just about every corner. These factors combined with an unrelenting sense of charm made for impeccable vibes, allowing the game to become greater than the sum of its parts. But in all fairness, things were already picking themselves up before I started to make sense of it all in hindsight. Combined with me growing more accustomed to that classic old school jank, Phantasia went from a title I wasn't having too much fun with, to something I thought was just okay, and finally into an entry I'd call a good game overall. There are even a lot of core factors that got me to love this series getting their start here. Characters being such a major narrative driving force, subverting traditional plot beats and tropes, having a thematic thread tying it all together, and having its reliance on characters extend from the story to the gameplay itself. You know, just to name a few. Of course, the game does take many half steps in achieving these goals, as is par for the course for a first attempt, and for every positive I listed in this closing segment, there is an asterisk to go with them. This was a great moment, but the boss at the end was awful. This dungeon was too damn long, and the puzzles weren't that good. Not a whole lot was done with time travel, with the very concept leaving a lot of meat on the bone. And while exploration was fun, it had been a lot more notable if it worked with a more engaging story outside of needing to get all the things like any other retro RPG would have me do. Its bumps on the road keep it at a level of a good game and not necessarily a great one. But even still, I had more fun with it than I thought I would, and dare I say, I'd do it again. With that in mind, I'm firm on the stance that any fan of this series should absolutely give it a try. Please don't wait for this game to get its third remake, or fourth or fifth, depending on if you count these. I don't. There's so much merit to experiencing a series debut in its original format, and in this game's case, I of course mean the Super Famicom or PlayStation version. Take it from me, there's a lot more to enjoy here than you could ever expect just by watching a dum-dum like me talk about it. Because after all, even with the rough edges, it's very easy to find something to enjoy in Tales of Phantasia, a lovable JRPG that stood out from its contenders, competently beginning gaming's finest offerings.